In Part 1, we discover that vampire Sunwoo learns from the 1,000-year-old cat Mr. Ko that he is destined to die soon, after transforming into a half-vampire, half-human. Now, let's continue the story. Sunwoo meets with his friends, including Rose. Rose advises him that in life, everything is a matter of give and take. She suggests that if Sunwoo wants Inhe's blood full of love, he must offer her something she deeply values, something she can't refuse. When Sunwoo returns to the mansion, he tries to strike a deal with Inhe. Since he has no material wealth to offer, he promises her full ownership of the mansion and vows to move out if she gives him her blood full of love. However, instead of feeling happy, Inhe becomes worried. The thought of Sunwoo leaving her and the mansion after becoming human deeply unsettles her. The next day, Dusk returns to work. Still uneasy about the vampires, he discusses his concerns with his assistant. The assistant informs him that Sunwoo's friends might also be vampires, further fueling Dusk's anxiety. Dusk arranges to meet Sunwoo away from the mansion and, without hesitation, demands that he leave. He admits that it irritates him to see Sunwoo around Inhe. Sunwoo is baffled but remains calm, explaining that he'll be leaving the mansion soon anyway, once he gets what he wants. Meanwhile, Inhe meets with Heyan, who proposes throwing a grand opening party for the guesthouse. She explains that it will boost the mansion's publicity, but her true motive is to get closer to Sunwoo and ask him out. Inhe is surprised and somewhat upset by this, even though she tries to seem happy. Later, she tells Sunwoo about Heyan's plan, expecting him to feel awkward. To her surprise, Sunwoo enthusiastically agrees to host the party. Feeling annoyed, Inhe snaps, telling him to organize it himself. As the preparations begin, Sunwoo enlists the help of his vampire friends. After decorating the mansion, Sunwoo gets ready and gifts Inhe a dress on behalf of his vampire friend Rose. Inhe gets ready, and when Sunwoo compliments her, it catches her off guard. It's the kind of attention she's secretly longed for. As the guests start to arrive, Heyan pulls Inhe aside to discuss her plan for a surprise moment with Sunwoo. While Heyan prepares, Dusk arrives at the mansion. After greeting Inhe, he discreetly begins searching for Sunwoo and his vampire friends, suspicious of their true nature. The party kicks off, and Dusk eventually finds Sunwoo's vampire friends drinking blood disguised as wine. To blend in, Dusk jokingly asks for a glass himself, hiding his discomfort. Out on the lawn, Sunwoo finds a quiet moment alone, but Inhe approaches him. She expresses her admiration for his determination to find his lost lover and his courage to risk everything to become human. Her words strike a chord with Sunwoo. As they return to the party, the guests unexpectedly cheer for Inhe, drawing everyone's attention. Heyan watches quietly, her excitement fading. To everyone's surprise, Sunwoo grabs Inhe's hand and pulls her onto the dance floor. Though confused and unsure at first, Inhe eventually gives in, allowing herself to be swept into the moment. They dance together, captivating the crowd while leaving Heyan silently observing from the sidelines. Dusk and Heyan couldn't be more disheartened as they watched Sunwoo and Inhe dancing together. The scene left them both heartbroken. Unable to tolerate it any longer, Heyan shatters a few glasses in frustration and storms out of the party. Concerned, Inhe follows her to try and explain, but Heyan feels deeply betrayed and lashes out, accusing Inhe of stealing the attention she longed for. Overwhelmed by heartbreak and anger, Heyan vows to take revenge. Just as tensions escalate, Dusk intervenes to defend Inhe, trying to calm the situation. Meanwhile, the naive Sunwoo is oblivious to the gravity of his actions. He can't comprehend why Heyan is so upset and seems baffled by the fallout. Later, an angry Dusk confronts Sunwoo, warning him to leave the mansion immediately and stop creating trouble for Inhe. Sunwoo approaches Inhe to apologize for the drama caused at the party. However, Inhe insists that he owes an apology to Heyan, as she had been the one most excited about the event, only for it to end in disappointment. Despite the tension, Inhe begins to notice her own growing feelings for Sunwoo. She finds herself increasingly drawn to his presence, even as the situation around them grows more complicated. While Sunwoo is lost in thought, Mr. Ko visits him. Frustrated by Sunwoo's hesitation to drink Inhe's blood, Mr. Ko reveals his personal stake in seeing Sunwoo become human. He admits that, centuries ago, it was he who revealed the secret to killing vampires to the hunters, indirectly causing the deaths of countless vampires, including Heyan. This revelation adds a new layer of urgency to Sunwoo's transformation. Meanwhile, Manha overhears Dusk and his assistant discussing vampires. Realizing they're looking for an insider to provide information about the vampire community, Manha begins to see an opportunity for himself. The next morning, Inhe meets with Dusk, who expresses his concern over the previous night's events. Directly, he asks if she has developed feelings for Sunwoo. Unable to respond, Inhe remains silent, her conflicted emotions evident. Dusk then shows her CCTV footage of Sunwoo using his vampire strength, hoping to expose the truth and force her to confront her feelings, and the reality of who Sunwoo truly is. Inhe becomes visibly concerned when Dusk shows her the footage of Sunwoo's vampire strength. She pleads with him to keep it a secret, but Dusk is baffled. He struggles to understand how she can live under the same roof as someone he considers a monster. Inhe insists that Sunwoo isn't dangerous. He has suffered greatly in the past and deserves understanding. Returning to the mansion, Inhe finds Sunwoo searching frantically for something. She learns that Haesun's sketch has been stolen, leaving him distressed. Meanwhile, Manha visits Heyan at her house. He hints that Sunwoo is not human and reveals he knows why Sunwoo is desperate to become one. Heyan is baffled and begins piecing together clues. She eventually concludes that she might be the reincarnation of Sunwoo's lost lover, Haesun. Later, Heyan, heavily drunk, calls Sunwoo. Worried, he rushes to the bar to pick her up. Seeing him, she brightens up and insists he stay over after dropping her home. The next morning, Heyan wakes up to find Sunwoo still there. Teasing her about drinking beyond her limit, he prepares to leave, but she confronts him. She reveals that she knows the truth about him, and shows him the stolen sketch of Haesun. Its centuries-old appearance confirms to her that Sunwoo has lived for hundreds of years without aging. Convinced she is Haesun reborn, Heyan insists Sunwoo leave the mansion or remove Inhe so they can be together again. However, Sunwoo realizes in that moment that Heyan is merely a lookalike of Haesun, lacking the kindness and selflessness his former lover possessed. Troubled and confused, Sunwoo struggles to differentiate between who represents Haesun's essence, gentle and caring Inhe, or the self-absorbed and obsessive Heyan. Meanwhile, Inhe becomes worried when Sunwoo doesn't return home overnight. She searches for him and finds him on a bridge, lost in thought. Furious and concerned, she scolds him for not checking his phone or coming home on time. Her worry touches Sunwoo, but suddenly his vision blurs, and he collapses in front of her. Hearing Inhe's screams, Lee and Park rush to the scene to help. They manage to bring Sunwoo back to the mansion. Meanwhile, Manha meets with Dusk to sell information about a half-vampire living nearby. Back at the mansion, Inhe stays by Sunwoo's side all night, watching over him. When he finally wakes up, she is overcome with emotion and confesses how devastated she would have been if something had happened to him. Struggling to contain her feelings, she admits that despite knowing he loves Heyan, she has developed strong feelings for him. Sunwoo listens quietly before leaning in to kiss her, expressing that he, too, has feelings for Inhe. He confesses that being with her makes him feel almost human, as though his heart is beating again. He promises her that he will live long enough to be with her. The next morning, Inhe, still curious, asks what happened between Sunwoo and Heyan the previous day. Sunwoo reveals that Heyan has Haesun's sketch and somehow figured out his identity as a vampire. However, he also shares how he realized that Heyan is nothing like the real Haesun. Her personality feels entirely different, self-centered and obsessive. He adds that, during his confusion, it was Inhe who showed him what true love means. As they draw closer, sharing a tender moment, Lee and Park interrupt them. They insist on staying at the mansion, claiming it's important to be around Sunwoo during such a difficult time. Meanwhile, Heyan meets with Dusk at his office. Out of curiosity, she asks if he knows about Sunwoo's true nature. Without hesitation, Dusk bluntly reveals that Sunwoo is a vampire who has lived far longer than anyone realizes. Shocked by this confirmation, Heyan begins to recall everything Sunwoo has said to her. The pieces start to fall into place, and her mind races with questions about his past and their connection. Later, a neighbor drops off his child at the mansion, needing someone to watch the kid while he attends a funeral. Inhe and the others are initially uneasy, as they've never taken care of a child before. When the kid insists on going to an amusement park, Sunwoo and Inhe take it as an opportunity for a fun outing and agree to go. At the amusement park, Sunwoo and Inhe enjoy themselves, treating it almost like their first date. They share playful moments and grow closer, savoring the light-hearted atmosphere. Elsewhere, Manha informs Dusk that Sunwoo is a half-vampire who has been trying to become human for centuries. He adds that during their recent encounter, he noticed Sunwoo's strength has significantly weakened, suggesting that his transformation may be imminent, or that his time might be running out. The child later leaves the mansion with their guardian, and that night, Inhe makes an important decision. She resolves to give Sunwoo her blood on the 100th day since they first met, believing their connection has grown strong enough. Meanwhile, Manha brings a human captive to his basement, where he has imprisoned several men to feed on their blood. Among the captives, one of them is revealed to be Inhe's father, although she remains unaware of his whereabouts. Heyan later arrives at the guest house and sees Sunwoo spending time with Inhe, enjoying her company. Jealous and frustrated, Heyan takes Inhe to a nearby cafe to confront her. She accuses Inhe of hiding Sunwoo's true identity and being insensitive for coming between her and Sunwoo. Heyan warns her to stay away from him, but Inhe refuses, declaring that she will follow her heart, regardless of Heyan's objections. Angered by Inhe's defiance, Heyan meets with Dusk and attempts to manipulate him into separating Sunwoo and Inhe, claiming that Dusk's feelings for Inhe should drive him to act. Later, Sunwoo informs Mr. Ko about Inhe's decision to give him her blood, as she has fallen in love with him. Mr. Ko initially expresses happiness, but his demeanor changes when he learns that Sunwoo plans to live with Inhe after becoming human. Shocked, Mr. Ko reveals a grim truth. For Sunwoo to become fully human, he must drain all of Inhe's blood, which would result in her death. Only one of them can survive. Unbeknownst to them, Manha overhears their conversation and immediately informs Dusk. Furious, Dusk storms into the guest house and punches Sunwoo, accusing him of being a vampire and warning him not to harm Inhe. At that moment, a stranger arrives at the guest house and persistently knocks on the door of one of the guests, Oi. When the stranger attempts to forcibly take Oi away, Inhe intervenes to defend her. However, the stranger overpowers her, prompting Sunwoo's protective instincts to awaken. Sunwoo rushes to the scene, using his vampire strength to protect Inhe from the attacker. Terrified by Sunwoo's power, the stranger flees. However, seeing Inhe's blood triggers Sunwoo's vampire instincts. He loses control and comes dangerously close to harming her, but Dusk intervenes just in time to stop him. Deeply worried, Dusk takes Inhe to a nearby hospital. When she regains consciousness, Inhe immediately asks about Sunwoo. Dusk, however, warns her sternly to stay away from him, referring to Sunwoo as a vampire monster who tried to suck her blood. When Sunwoo calls Inhe's phone, Dusk answers instead and warns him to stay away from her. Despite this, the next morning, Inhe decides to return to the mansion, declaring that she needs Sunwoo, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Heyan visits Sunwoo at the mansion, bringing back Haesun's sketch. She questions why he stopped chasing after Haesun despite meeting her again after centuries. Sunwoo explains that after getting to know Heyan, he realized she doesn't remind him of Haesun at all. She feels like a completely different person with Haesun's face. Heyan, unwilling to let him go, insists that Sunwoo is the only one who ever made her feel love. Later, while wandering outside, lost in thought, Sunwoo sees Inhe running toward him. She hugs him tightly, vowing to stay by his side until the very end. Back at the mansion, Inhe meets Soi, who apologizes for putting her in danger and thanks her for stepping in to help. Touched by Inhe's loyalty, Sunwoo decides to abandon his plan to drink her blood. Instead, he resolves to find her missing father, Butler Ju, to make her happy. Meanwhile, Manha meets Dusk again. Pleased that Manha's information about Sunwoo being a half-vampire was accurate, Dusk offers him a greater reward to capture Sunwoo alive. The next morning, Manha spots Sunwoo and Lee distributing flyers in search of Butler Ju, Inhe's father. Meanwhile, Inhe meets Heyan, who threatens to sue her for deceiving her into investing in a house filled with vampires. Heyan demands that Inhe either return her money or leave the mansion. However, Inhe refuses to leave and promises to pay her back within a week as requested. That same night, Mr. Ko visits the mansion to warn that Sunwoo's life is in danger because he refuses to drink Inhe's blood. Saddened and frustrated, they confront Sunwoo, scolding him for his reckless decisions and urging him to consider their concerns. The following night, Sunwoo receives a call from someone claiming to have seen the missing person. He rushes to Manha's house, where he discovers humans imprisoned and bottles of human blood in the basement. Before he can react, he is captured, and Manha reveals himself. With Sunwoo's life hanging by a thread, he is too weak to escape. Manha contacts Dusk, giving him the address and inviting him to see Sunwoo in his dire state. As Manha leaves the basement, he encounters Park and his friends, Rose and Lee. Manha proves too powerful for Park to handle alone, so Lee joins him in fighting Manha, while Rose sneaks into the basement to rescue Sunwoo. Rose frees Sunwoo and the other captives along the way, including Inhe's father Butler Ju, whom Sunwoo does not yet recognize. Outside, Sunwoo and his friends confront Manha, but he manages to escape. Afterwards, Butler Ju reveals his identity to Sunwoo, who is overjoyed to see him alive. When they return to the mansion, Inhe is stunned to see her father, butler Ju, alive. However, Ju avoids telling the truth about being imprisoned by vampire Manha, leading Inhe to mistakenly believe he abandoned her. Furious, she storms off to the basement, consumed by anger and confusion. Sunwoo insists that butler Ju stay in the mansion, reassuring him that Inhe's anger is only temporary. Meanwhile, Manha contacts Dusk, informing him of the situation and vowing to capture Sunwoo again. The next morning, Inhe finds her father talking with Sunwoo. Butler Ju explains how Manha wanted to buy the mansion from him, and when he refused to sell it, Manha became furious and kidnapped him. Overcome with emotion, Inhe breaks down in tears as she learns about her father's suffering. Meanwhile, Heyan decides to seize the mansion after Inhe fails to return her investment on time. Later, Inhe thanks Sunwoo for rescuing her father. Since it marks the 100th day since they first met, she discovers that Sunwoo no longer wishes to become human. He reveals that he wants to remain strong to protect her. When the payment demand arrives at the mansion, Sunwoo realizes that Heyan has officially withdrawn her investment. Determined to resolve the issue, he visits her house and urges her to stop her obsession with the mansion. However, Heyan refuses to listen, revealing that all she cares about is owning the mansion and having Sunwoo. When Inhe confides in Dusk about her troubles, he becomes deeply upset. Despite knowing that Inhe does not return his feelings, he decides to repay Heyan's investment on Inhe's behalf. When Heyan finds out, she is enraged at Dusk. She warns him that she will now seek revenge against him as well. Returning home, Inhe finds Sunwoo feeling unwell and notices the scars on his hands, worrying her even more. Meanwhile, Dusk purchases a silver knife, determined to kill Sunwoo. The next morning, Sunwoo leaves the house without explanation. Inhe, concerned, learns from Lee that Sunwoo has gone to die alone, refusing to drink her blood as it would cost her life. Frantic, she searches for him but cannot find him anywhere. At the same time, Dusk discovers that Manha had been keeping humans captive in his basement to feed on their blood, including Inhe's father. Outraged, Dusk confronts Manha and ends their deal in frustration. The next morning, butler Ju speaks with Inhe, who is sick with worry over Sunwoo's disappearance. However, butler Ju admits that he's relieved Sunwoo is gone, as he disapproves of his daughter dating a vampire. He urges her to sell the house and leave the city, but Inhe adamantly refuses. Later, when Inhe meets Dusk at a cafe, he also tries to convince her to sell the mansion, warning her it will only bring more trouble. Still, Inhe refuses, determined to protect the house at all costs. That same night, Manha contacts Dusk, claiming he will do him a favor by killing Sunwoo, who is now outside the mansion. When Inhe returns home, she recognizes Manha as a guest and invites him inside. However, Manha insists on meeting Sunwoo and demands that Inhe reveal his location, growing increasingly forceful. As Manha threatens to suck Inhe's blood for refusing to reveal Sunwoo's location, Sunwoo's protective mark appears. He arrives just in time to defend her, but Manha proves far too powerful. When Manha tries to harm Inhe, Sunwoo becomes enraged, tapping into hidden strength that forces Manha to retreat. Inhe is overjoyed to see Sunwoo alive and hugs him tightly, unaware that Dusk is watching from a distance. Together, Inhe and Sunwoo return home safely. The next morning, a woman who witnessed Sunwoo and Manha's fight arrives at the mansion with a group of people. They accuse Sunwoo of being a vampire and demand he come outside. Remaining calm, Inhe insists that Sunwoo is not a vampire but is simply unwell. Later, Sunwoo receives a call from Dusk, who requests to meet. When they meet, Dusk tries to convince Sunwoo that he is a danger to Inhe and urges him to kill himself using the silver knife. Sunwoo refuses, declaring that he will live to cherish every moment he has with Inhe. Frustrated, Dusk charges at Sunwoo, intending to kill him. However, Inhe arrives while searching for Sunwoo. Surprised to see him with Dusk, she demands an explanation. Dusk claims he was only trying to convince Sunwoo to leave her for her own good. Ignoring him, Inhe grabs Sunwoo's hand and takes him away. The next morning, Manha visits Heyan and tells her that Sunwoo, the man she is so determined to have, is going to die soon. Heyan rushes to the mansion, only to find that Sunwoo is visiting the hostile neighbors. Sunwoo tries to reason with them, admitting he is a vampire but assuring them that he means no harm. He promises to leave soon and asks them not to trouble Inhe or the others because of him. When Sunwoo returns home, Heyan confronts him and tries to convince him to drink Inhe's blood to survive and love her without hesitation. Later, Dusk confronts Heyan, furious that she is spreading rumors about vampires in the mansion. Their argument is interrupted when Manha appears. Seeing Heyan with Dusk, Manha reveals that Dusk is after Sunwoo's blood to break a curse. He then demands payment from Heyan for the information. However, Heyan dismisses him and orders him to leave. Enraged by her disdain, Manha attacks her, attempting to drain her blood. At that moment, Dusk stabs Manha in the chest with the silver knife, stopping him. Manha, unable to withstand the pain of the silver knife, vanishes into thin air. Heyan, shaken by witnessing Dusk kill a vampire, becomes increasingly worried, realizing he could do the same to Sunwoo. The next day, she meets Sunwoo at a cafe. Although she has accepted that she cannot have him, she still cares for him and warns him to be cautious, as Dusk is after his blood to escape his own fate of dying young. Taking her words to heart, Sunwoo visits Dusk at his office. Acknowledging that Dusk would make a worthy protector for Inhe, Sunwoo willingly offers him his blood. As Sunwoo's time runs out, he requests one last trip with Inhe after bidding farewell to his vampire friends, Lee and Park. Inhe and Sunwoo head to the beach, where they spend a peaceful day together. After watching the sunset, they share a heartfelt kiss. However, Sunwoo soon feels a sharp pain in his chest, forcing them to retreat to a nearby hotel. Inhe, desperate to help, gives him a few drops of her blood. The taste of her blood triggers memories for Sunwoo, revealing that Inhe is actually his long-lost Heyan. But after giving him her blood, Inhe falls ill, taking on his suffering in his place. Sunwoo lays her in bed and steps outside to meet Dusk as planned. Under the full blood moon, Sunwoo asks Dusk to take care of Inhe after he's gone. As the mark on his neck glows, Dusk prepares to strike with the silver knife. At that moment, Inhe appears and tries to stop him. However, Sunwoo takes the knife and stabs himself, choosing to end his life. In his final moments, he questions his fate, wondering if he will ever find Inhe again in his next life. The next day, Inhe and the other vampires hold a funeral for Sunwoo at the mansion. Afterward, Mr. Ko arrives at the mansion with a bag. When Inhe opens it, she finds it filled with gold. Mr. Ko explains that he had hidden it safely, intending to give it to Sunwoo once he became human. With the discovery of the gold, Park was able to open his own restaurant, sporting a fresh new hairstyle to match his newfound success. Meanwhile, Lee and Rose have also turned their lives around, uplifted by the change in fortune. Dusk's terminal illness has been miraculously cured, thanks to Sunwoo's selfless act of offering his blood. As for Inhe, she continues to manage the guest house on her own, living a simple and normal life. Strangely, many customers now flock to her guest house, drawn to its warm and mysterious aura, as if Sunwoo's presence still lingers there. That's the end of the series, guys. I hope you enjoyed it till the end.